part 3. Also, I just wanted to showcase my other fall decor. Isn't that cute? Yes, the pumpkins. Anyway, getting back to what I was saying, the 1968 television special that Elvis had was a shot to his career that at the time he wasn't like in the poorhouse, but it was semi dwindling. But getting back to my original statement, at the first half, we get a better sense of how vulnerable he was, Elvis as a young man. And yes, essentially, that's what he wanted. He wanted to be the saving grace, the superhero to his mama, and provide for her. Very much a mama's boy. And not in the bad sense, it's just that, that's what poverty does. And so when he is successful at that, but the thing is that he's so bum rushed into a contract and becoming national and perhaps with the hopes of international fame, he signs a contract where he doesn't necessarily read or understand how that it can affect his wallet and also the estate. So his mama did always have an inclination of what she thought the colonel really was brewing. He's trying to pass himself off as a very dignified businessman and always about promotion and creating balloons and merchandise. This was like the start of all that. Because I think up until this point, I don't think there was like really any artist that was banking off of merchandise. So we saw a lot of firsts in this film. Also, like we saw as well, if it wasn't for Elvis, we wouldn't have the boldness of what rock and roll would eventually evolve into, especially when it came to the 70s. I mean, there are artists like Led Zeppelin that also pay nod and homage to him because he was one of those first artists that put it all out there. He was going to shake how he wanted to shake, hella high water, and he was arrested. He was arrested for shaking and jiving like he was. So, but again, he was influenced. But to a credit to Baz, aside from the crazy way he edits, he did introduce a good multi-ethnic cast. And we're not talking just about like side pieces here. They were interwoven into the story. So I just want to make mention that there was references to Little Richard and B.B. King. And yeah, you see, and even if Baz is sometimes familiar faces, because Richard Roxburgh, I believe that's how you pronounce his last name. He played Elvis's dad, Vernon, but if he looks familiar, he was in Moulin Rouge as well. He played the villain. But there's such a number of great artists here, actors, that did great interpretations of the people who would influence him. But side note, I do want to make mention that even though I want to say that the film was like a roller coaster, it had its ups and it had its downs. No shade to Austin Butler, right? I think he's going to go on to perhaps even either win a Golden Globe or an Oscar for this year that's impending, for his outstanding performance. And I say it's the saving grace. Now, no shade to Tom Hanks. I've loved you. I have loved you for years. I've loved you since Bosom Buddy days. And if my audience is too young to even know what Bosom Buddies is, Google it, please. Or I'm sure there's some clip on YouTube or something. But I've loved you since then. Splash. Come on, man. Money Pit. I've loved you since then. Sleepless in Seattle, Big, but and no shade, you're a phenomenal actor. But when he's playing this, like, I don't know, so many people are like coming for our new Little Mermaid. I think her name is Halle Bailey. She's a beautiful actress. And people are like tearing it apart because it's not the traditional. It's a cartoon. Take several seats. It's imaginary. No, it's a fish, a human fish. Calm the hell down when they're like, oh, Little Mermaid's always been white. She can't be black. Stupid scientists chiming in like it's just not scientifically correct. Whatever. Aside from that, why isn't anybody coming for Tom Hanks? He's not an obese person. He's not an husky person. He's not a person that's overweight or voluptuous to play this role. The Colonel was of a certain size. So why is it that nobody's throwing him shade over this? So see how we pick and choose. You see how the American public can be, the American psyche can be. Shame on you. But anyway, and saying that, again, no discredit to, the majority of the film is based on his lens and his interpretation, how he never saw himself technically like a villain. It's almost like he's trying to convince himself that he did a good deed. He brought Elvis to the masses. But it was so off-putting, the prosthetic and the fat suit, I'm sorry, that they put on him that wasn't very convincing. I didn't enjoy it. It was kind of like hit or it was a big miss. It wasn't even hit or miss. It was just a miss throughout most of it. And the accent, I think, is just so over the top. I want to say, though, for a film that's almost 2 hours and change, a good portion of it they could have like maybe downsized, because it gets really interesting past the 1968 TV special. And you see how much of an influence and near dominance that the Colonel had over Elvis. And when you think about it too, I just saw a interview that was 4 years ago with Jonathan Rhys Meyers, who played Elvis and won a Golden Globe for that performance, that TV miniseries. And he breaks it down in the sense that to play him, he had to kind of make him, in that sense, like almost making him mortal. When we immortalize our artists, it's hard to even approach that because it's so intimidating. So when he made this analogy where it's like in my head, I saw him as just a young man trying to help his mama out, get her a home. And I don't know if it was him who said it or somebody else who said it, that technically his other aspiration was to see the world. And this is a man that died relatively young. He was 42 years old. Like when you see footage of him from the 70s, when he's already like, unfortunately really wrapped up into the whole fame thing, because he's only been in one place for like, I don't know, close to 5 to 6 years. I think that's how they kind of detail it in the film. So it was like a gilded cage, and to kind of, as many shows as he was asked to do, nightly, weekly, monthly, he never got any breaks. So he was already being fed medicines, drugs actually, to wake him, to help him fall asleep, to be alert. It was so much on his immune system. He was breaking down, and that was all attributed to this wonky ass manager of the Colonel. So he had aspirations. He was like, if this goes really well, and the way that the Colonel sells it to him too, like, we'll get you this, we'll get you that. Well, and he was the creator, in his head, and maybe he was the creator of the big satellite concert where you can be televised from any part of the world, from your one particular place in Vegas, and he was seen in Spain and whatever, but he wanted to see those places. And the Colonel was such an a-hole because the man had issues, immigration issues. I'm not pointing it towards that. I'm just saying that the man never really showed proof. He was never really a true colonel and had no passport. So of course he couldn't leave the country. And like a lot of people say in the film, Elvis was his meal ticket. So the later half is so much more interesting. There's so much more meat. And I will say it's because, sorry Baz, you took out the pop culture references that are current and contemporary. It's like almost like the movie starts to slow down and it starts to really turn into a biopic, which is what we want. Like, okay, I think we're okay with just Elvis's songs, you know, or maybe songs that were relevant at that time. But why did you have to insist on putting Doja Cat, no shade, but Doja Cat and trap artists and maybe Amigos, and it's like, enough. I want to be immersed in that realm. To a credit, that's why I love Bohemia Rhapsody, because it stayed true to the period that they were emphasizing. And Rocket Man, I loved Rocket Man, and it was over the top, super dramatic. It felt very musical. I'm sure at some point it's going to turn into a musical. But when you put these interjections of contemporary and then the jump cuts, and I feel like I'm in an acid trip, I don't like it. I don't like it. I've never been a fan of it. Sorry. And I'm a fan of yours. I love Romeo and Juliet, some certain parts of it. You know, that one dance sequence was like, young hearts run free. I love that scene. That scene is my heart. But everything else is like, Jesus Lord. And I know it's a dramatization and it's supposed to be over the top and you're known for that, but it's just like, I'm sorry. So it's a watch. Just be prepared. You're gonna sit through almost 3 hours of this if you are gonna watch it on HBO Max. I'd watch it for Butler's performance. I think he did a phenomenal job. And the fact that I think it's been hard for him to even DP program from the way that he normally speaks, to really get that Mississippi sound. And I said Memphis because I was thinking of the Memphis Mafia, which was his friends and bodyguards that he named that way. There are instances of Priscilla, but it's not inundated. It's not her vision here. We do see the pitfalls of their marriage because of the stage life and his side chicks and all types of crazy stuff and the drugs and the alcohol. So, but we don't, it's not that story. We've seen that story multiple times. And the actress did a phenomenal job. I do think that they did change her age when they met, which was a no-no, because regardless of how we see things now, that's not the age that they met. So anyway, that I will make a point. But aside from that, it was a watch, and I want to say the latter half of the film definitely is worth the watch. Like, that's the meat and potatoes that you really want to absorb and really concentrate on. But yes, so hit or miss. It's kind of like this. This is how I felt